Blog Talk Radio.
And welcome to Community Garden Revolution. I'm Mary Huckel, the radio show host, and we've got with us today a wonderful group. I'm excited because I'm from the Midwest, and we look at Chicago as being the ones that we look at for trends or what to do or what we should be doing. And this is the Rogers Park Garden Group, and we've got Megan Cusick who's with us, and she's a coordinating she's on the coordinating committee, and she has been with this group for a while, and they're all volunteers. And Megan, thank you for being so patient and coming aboard. I appreciate your time today.
It's my pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, my honor. My honor. Can you first tell us how you got started and why your group even wanted to get started? And this is called the Rogers Park Garden Group. And then also tell them the extent of where you all are, what your boundaries are, that kind of thing.
Sure. So Rogers Park is a neighborhood on the far north side of Chicago, and we're right along the lakefront. So our geographical boundaries are the lake on the east side, Evanston on the north side, and then Devon Avenue, probably unfamiliar to most of your listeners, but we're that very northern tip of the city.
Now, that would be along the, Michigan area,
yes,
Michigan River area?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Right along,
all right. And
along
then,
Lake Michigan.
Right, okay, Lake Michigan, yeah, thank you. And then also, I should know that, Lake Michigan, because we used to stay on Market Street all the time, Lakeshore Drive, I was thinking of St. Louis, Lakeshore Drive all the time, and then when I got older, then we stayed along there on Michigan Avenue, which I loved. But anyway, we'll get back to that later on with former Mayor Daley and what he did with, high-rise buildings. What is it that, you have an area and you saw the trends or something happening across America that people were getting together to have more green space and also community gardening. How is it that you said, maybe we should do this too? And then how did you get that started?
So I'm not one of the founding members. I was a latecomer to the group. However, a couple of neighbors got together in 2007 and saw some other communities within Chicago that had established garden groups and wanted to do something similar in Rogers Park. So the purpose is really threefold, and that is to sort of bring together a community of gardeners, providing just support and sort of a mutual interest group for people who are interested in gardening. The second thing is to provide direct support to people who are engaged in gardening efforts, whether in their own yards, on their own property, or somewhere in the community. And then the third thing is to build gardening opportunities throughout the community, and with a focus on public places, both parks, parkways, along the commuter rail tracks, in traffic circles, that sort of thing. So it really was a sort of a multi-focus purpose to the group coming together.
Yeah, this is similar to what Bette Midler has done in New York. And I've interviewed that group before and had them in my first book, and Community Garden Revolution. And basically, she looked around how, she could either see everything look downtrodden and all concrete, whatever, and she decided to add some greenery. And she does the same thing as what you all are doing. It doesn't have to necessarily be a community garden. It could be a spot like Tiffany and Company. They've got like an area that they created a really neat garden. So how is it that you talk to businesses or organizations to say, hey, by beautifying our area, this gives good quality of life, it gives better property value, it can cut down crime. How is it that you get those people up in Chicago interested in wrapping their minds around something like this that maybe they are just used in the past of seeing the concrete?
I think there are a couple things. One is that we don't really market gardening to people so much as we provide opportunities to enjoy and provide examples of what is possible when people get together to do something. And there are a couple different ways that we do that. One is that we have events and programs throughout the gardening season, which is, of course, shorter than we'd like in Chicago, but we generally run from April through October with a monthly program. And we will do things that either help address a specific gardening need or look at the sort of larger issue of gardening in an urban environment. We also provide opportunities for people to see examples of gardens. We have, for many years, done something called a garden meander, so similar to a garden walk, perhaps a little less formal, but having neighbors open their yards to the community to come through and see and talk about what is planted, what the, if there's a particular approach. Some people have more woodland gardens. Some people have, very extensive flower gardens. Some people are more focused on growing food. So we really try to provide examples and opportunities and support for people. But the other thing we do is something called Adopt a Public Way grants. And since our founding in 2007, we've provided more than $30,000 in grant funding, in small grants for people to take over, with permission, of course, a public space. And so that public space can be the parkway. We live in a neighborhood where there's, the parkway is the area between the sidewalk and the street, and that's technically city property. But some people have converted that from just a grass space to an actual garden. We also have traffic circles and sort of corner cutouts. People have developed gardens there. Some of our neighborhood schools have developed gardens. We've supported those efforts at several of our neighborhood elementary schools as well as our neighborhood high school. We also have people who have developed gardens along the commuter rail tracks, so that rather than just seeing trees and debris as you walk, down the stairs from the rail line, you're actually seeing a lovely garden. And we've also done some things in some of our parks, both in small playgrounds where there are just tiny sort of spaces for plantings, and then in some of our larger parks where there are some designated spaces to do more extensive plantings. So we've supported neighbors who do those projects, and in addition to the grant funding that we provide, we also help gather volunteers to work on specific projects.
And how is it that you find when you go to these parks? Because I know where I live, they've been looking at some of the older parks, particularly if they have older libraries on them, and thinking about adding space there. How do you find a way to have the water spigots, or do you have irrigation, or do you have someone come by and just water them from a big tank? How do you find a way to water?
Yeah, that's a big issue, and we do a couple things. One is that we always require, as part of our grant-making process, that a water source is identified. What we've found in the past is that generally neighbors are very supportive of gardening efforts. So either a local business or a nearby building will offer water access to help maintain space. So that's one thing that we do. And in fact, we were just talking with a neighbor who's going to be planting a small area in a children's playground, and the condominium next door will provide water access so that the plants can be maintained. So we do encourage or actually require that water source be identified before we actually move forward with a grant. But the other thing is that we also have advisors, so the folks who do the grant review process are also very knowledgeable about what works here in this environment, so that they can make recommendations about specific types of plants that will do well without excessive maintenance, so that watering is not, it doesn't have to be done daily, or it doesn't have to be done at an unreasonable rate.
Do you have classes that you connect with the universities then? Do you use them as a resource by any chance, some of the universities that are around you all?
We don't have classes, but as I said earlier, we do a monthly program, and we connect with different people and different resources in the neighborhood. We are near Loyola University on the north side of Chicago, and last year one of our programs was to take a tour of their Institute for Environmental Sustainability. And that's a relatively new program at Loyola, but they've built a building, their Center for Sustainability, and they have aquaponics and a greenhouse, a vertical farm. They have biodiesel production, a geothermal energy system, and then not far from there, they also have an urban farm and an apiary. So we took a tour of this space and learned about what they're doing and how they're trying to integrate some of their programs into the community, and also how they're using that center for student learning.
Oh, that sounds wonderful, Gal. That sounds absolutely wonderful. I would love to have one of our universities do that.
It was really a great program, but we actually do, we bring in speakers who are, knowledgeable on different topics. So last year we had someone from the Natural Resources Defense Council come in and talk about our pollinators and some of the threats to the pollinators, and also the things we can do to sort of support their a healthy population migrating through or living in, in this particular area. So we really try and tap into various resources within the city or just beyond the city.
Yeah, you have a monthly meeting. Now, do you all do a monthly newsletter then to kind of keep everybody in the loop of what's going on and keep their interest going? Do you all do that too?
Yes, we do. And
Great.
in addition to the, information about our programming, we also include information about volunteer opportunities. And if we have any other, we share information about where the Adopt a Public Way grants are going. So it's a good way to be in contact between the monthly programs.
Now, back in the day when you had the Mayor Daley, I remember when he was really pushing doing rooftop gardening, and he did a lot of ad planters and so on. Like Michigan Avenue was one of the streets that was in this program, and he was adding some greenery, that kind of thing. And so I when we were starting to develop a little bit more of our downtown, I had mentioned to some folks, I said, we need to really look at this in Chicago and add some more greenery. Now, Gal, I'm telling you, here's what their idea was. There's one rooftop that has an AstroTurf putting green, and then a few other places now have container gardening, and I think you have to get a microscope out to find where those containers are now, but that was the extent of the greening that was done in our town. So are you all doing more with those skyscrapers? Because I know that Washington, D.C. added more this past year. St. Louis did. Portland, Oregon. I want to say Nashville, Tennessee. But some of the large cities in America, and, of course, you're one of the top 3 or 5 cities in America. Are you seeing a little bit more of that? And then are you all pushing something like that also in the area where you live, like using your parking garages, the top floor, or a warehouse, or another maybe taller building by any chance?
Yeah, we are in a neighborhood that is very residential. We don't have a lot of high-rises. We do have a few, but we haven't seen a real push here for rooftop gardening.
I see.
Although one of our members is a caretaker of that City Hall rooftop garden, which also contains a butterfly garden. So,
cool.
I think that, though, what we've seen in Chicago is once the idea of gardening both on a large scale in some of our big parks and on a smaller scale in the neighborhoods and both at homes and in public spaces sort of took hold, it's easier to sort of spread that, or easier to get other people interested